Pastor Nathaniel Okoye was a name that echoed through the streets of Luanda, a bustling African city full of contrast, palm-lined luxury neighborhoods beside noisy marketplaces. He built a megachurch called the Harvest Chapel, attracting tens of thousands who came seeking miracles, financial breakthroughs, and wisdom. His teachings about wealth and divine prosperity struck a chord with the masses who saw him as both prophet and mentor. Clad in white agbada and golden chains symbolizing divine favor, Pastor Nathaniel lived in a mansion that gleamed like marble in the sun. He was generous, funding scholarships and donating to the poor, yet his opulence stirred quiet envy among those closest to him. Unknown to him, jealousy brewed quietly in the shadows of his pulpit. Pastor David, his junior minister, had served Nathaniel for 6 years, watching his fame grow like a flame in Harmattan. At first, he admired his senior's charisma, but over time, that admiration twisted into envy. Why did people shout Nathaniel's name and not his? Why did he live in a mansion while David still struggled with rent? One Sunday morning, as he preached to the youth service, Pastor David's words carried a subtle bitterness. He began to question the church's wealth-based doctrine, suggesting that true holiness was often clothed in humility and poverty. His tone was soft, but it marked the beginning of division. Pastor David wasn't alone. He began gathering a circle of loyal followers, disgruntled church workers, a bitter choir leader, and a few ambitious assistant pastors. They met secretly in a small flat in the outskirts of the city, speaking in hushed tones, whispering about Pastor Nathaniel's corruption and hidden riches. "He must be doing something illegal," one muttered. "No man of God can afford a private jet without blood on his hands," another added. David nodded silently, fanning the flames of suspicion until they erupted into a full plan. Take him down from the inside. They knew words weren't enough. To make real damage, they needed law enforcement. A bribe was made to a struggling police officer, Inspector Jemba, known for his taste for quick cash. They told him Nathaniel was laundering money through the church, hiding millions in foreign accounts and under his estate. The inspector, seeing a chance for fame and promotion, promised to act swiftly. He secured a warrant to search Pastor Nathaniel's home and vehicles. The news spread like wildfire in hushed conversations and cryptic social media posts. The end of the so-called prosperity preacher is near. It happened on a quiet Thursday morning. Police vans, sirens, and heavily armed officers stormed Nathaniel's mansion while his wife and children were still in their pajamas. Neighbors peeked from windows, recording clips for gossip blogs. The search was intense. Walls tapped, car seats ripped apart, even flower pots turned over. But they found nothing. Not a single forged document, no illegal cash stash, no hidden vaults. Pastor Nathaniel, calm but visibly shaken, kept repeating, "My God will vindicate me." The officers left with embarrassment, and the inspector began to doubt the source of his information. The news of the fruitless raid exploded on every platform. Church members were outraged, flooding social media with prayers, testimonies, and videos defending their beloved pastor. "He paid my school fees. He saved my marriage. He gave me a business loan when no one else would." Pastor Nathaniel gave a press conference with tears in his eyes. "I forgive those who lied against me," he said, "because the truth always shines, even in darkness." His words melted hearts, and his popularity soared higher than before. But Pastor David watched all this from his apartment, trembling, not with joy, but fear. Pastor David's team began to fall apart. One of the associate pastors confessed during a prayer meeting, sobbing as he revealed their plan to tarnish Nathaniel's name. Another member of the group was arrested for leaking false information to the police. The circle of conspirators began to crumble like dry bread. Meanwhile, church leadership summoned David for questioning. He denied all involvement, claiming innocence, but his voice quivered and his eyes refused to meet theirs. The elders decided to suspend him pending further investigation, a decision that would haunt him. That night, David couldn't sleep. Guilt clawed at his conscience like a hyena at raw meat. He kept hearing Nathaniel's voice, I forgive those who lied against me." The words rang louder than any sermon he had ever heard. He remembered the kindness Nathanael had once shown him, the times he had paid his rent and called him, "my son." Shame wrapped around him like a wet cloak. Even his own prayers felt heavy. He opened his Bible, but the pages looked empty. In that silence, he realized the cost of envy and betrayal. On Sunday, David entered the church compound quietly. The guards recognized him but said nothing. He walked past the crowd, heart pounding, and approached Pastor Nathanael's office. He knocked gently, unsure if he would be welcomed. Nathanael opened the door and looked into the eyes of his former protege. Silence stretched between them like a wall. Then David fell to his knees, tears gushing from his eyes. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I was blinded by jealousy." Nathanael didn't speak immediately, he just knelt beside him and hugged him. The church elders met once again. After hearing David's confession and Nathanael's forgiveness, they voted for David's reinstatement, not as a pastor immediately, but as a servant of the house, to rebuild his character. David accepted with humility, even choosing to clean the church toilets and arrange chairs during services. Congregants were touched by the story of redemption. Many came forward with their own stories of bitterness, envy, and repentance. The church entered a new season, not just of wealth, but of wisdom and inner healing. David's transformation inspired others. He started a youth mentorship program teaching about integrity, contentment, and spiritual growth. His story became a powerful sermon that Pastor Nathanael would occasionally reference: "Even a fallen son can rise again." 1 year later, David's fire returned, not the fire of ambition, but of true service. He preached not to be seen, but to uplift. He began fasting again, studying with fresh hunger, and praying not for miracles, but for mercy. Inspector Jemba's role came to light when one of the co-conspirators confessed fully to the authorities. The inspector was suspended and eventually demoted. His career in ruins, he visited the church anonymously one Sunday, sitting at the back with a hood over his face. At altar call, something tugged at his heart. He went forward and fell at the feet of the same man he once tried to destroy. Pastor Nathanael looked at him with eyes full of compassion and simply said, "Welcome home." The entire city of Luanda was moved by the events. Radio hosts, bloggers, and even secular politicians began attending services. The Harvest Chapel's message evolved, not just about wealth, but about forgiveness, unity, and godly leadership. Other churches took note. Pastors began teaching integrity more openly. Corruption in ministry was called out. And across the city, a new hunger for genuine spirituality emerged. Pastor Nathanael began calling David, "my son," again, and eventually, he was restored to full pastoral duties. But this time, David stood in humility. He often preached barefoot, using his life as an example of how God lifts the truly broken. During one anniversary service, he spoke boldly. "I am proof that God can use the worst of us to teach the best of lessons." The crowd wept, and Nathanael nodded proudly from his seat. The prodigal had returned, not to the pulpit, but to purpose. Years later, Harvest Chapel had grown into a network of churches across the continent. Pastor Nathanael became a spiritual father to many, and David now led one of the biggest branches in the northern district. Though his mansion was smaller, his heart was larger. And every time he passed by the office where he once wept, he smiled, remembering that sometimes the worst storm comes to teach us the greatest peace.